What's up, everybody? Welcome to the new job site. We have been here a few days now, although we've been pretty efficient about our time. Throwing our footings in to our augered holes. We've got beam number 1 and beam number 2. All of our bearing posts are in for those. Then we've got beam number 3 that comes through here, and beam number 4 out at the edge of the precipice here, or the edge of the ravine. And so by the time we'll obviously be, at the level that the patio doors are. When you get out here, we'll be, that's hard, doesn't translate in here, but maybe 6-7 feet above the ground, which will be kind of cool out into space out here. And the neighbor's got a bridge over the ravine, and our customer here was considering maybe getting one over there someday off of the porch, so that'd be cool. Come back and add that, but nothing you haven't seen before. Being careful about our layout. Where's our drawing? Take a peek at this so you know what it is that we're building. This customer's general idea, he had a kind of a shape in mind that we went ahead and used, but so beam 1, beam 2, beam 3, and beam 4. And these here are aligned, and this will give you a nice spot for a tree someday or a hot tub on a lower level. We went around about whether or not it made any sense, and ultimately it could be, we could replace the rim joist and a few deck boards someday and fill that in if we want. Whereas if we built it that way to start with, we wouldn't be able to feature something here in the future that easily. So rest assured, we've talked all about it. Welcome back, y'all. We've got all of our posts in now. We've got 8-footers in the ground to carry the surface of the deck line, and 12s where we're going to come right through for sections of guardrail. We've also got superficial guardrail that will be adhered to the rim joist in places where we don't need to be right on down into the ground. It's just easier to avoid. But I tried, obviously, in the design to incorporate bearing posts and guard posts if they could be one and the same. It's just matters of efficiency. Whoa. We have obviously had some dry line out here on rebar to create a grid and sort of relate the space to the drawing. And the drawing was obviously done on measurements, site measurements from early in the process, basically. And everything came in really nice. So we got beam 4 there, and then some corners, beam 3. Jeremy's just using our mantis just to refine the surface. We're going to end up with, let me set this stuff down. We're going to end up with a grade down and away like we had at 51, like we had the other site. Down and away from the hill, and as well as 6 mil plastic and then pea gravel to hold it down. And so what ends up happening is, despite the fact that we've got wood right into the ground, this whole area will be completely weather protected, and it'll be dry as a bone, especially with the kind of immediately into the ravine here for any other water. But his roof system and downspouts plumb water into the ravine, and everything that falls here will roll along on top of the plastic and run off in there. Again, dry as a bone. So really nice longevity here. I think a total of 20 bearing posts, and then 4 more posts in the ground for the lower newels on 2 sets of stairs left to do. But just a beautiful work week. Late September. Couldn't be any nicer. I've got a hoodie on here after lunch because I'm digesting, so I mean it's like mid-60s and sunny. It's totally perfect weather. Alright, next step is lopping these off, notching, and putting beams in, and we'll come back and check that out. Just in time for the weekend, and we've got all of our beams in. They're overly long in these areas where we're going to have angles that for the rim joist to cut the corner off, and so we'll leave everything long, and then in the end we'll use a string line to show just exactly where they got to be trimmed, carefully trim them to fit. But next week we're going to bring in some fill, probably at least a couple yards, if not 3 or 4. Start kind of high at this house and go downhill smoothly all around, run the plate compactor on that, and so it's extremely downhill pitched right into the ravine, and then we'll put the 6 mil plastic on top. And we'll leave all this, we'll do that now because we can walk right out in here. And then we'll probably start with rim joists at the back side and start a little like fabricating area for joists and fill in floor joists from the far side toward us here all the way across. And we got to get the ball rolling on what he wants to do for a surface on here. We're talking about maybe doing a border, a pair of boards maybe for a border that follows the unique profile, which is kind of the star of the show here on this deck. And so you showcase that really nicely when you do a border, and then the inside is filled. And obviously all these newels or baluster posts are going to come down to the right height, and we've got to start looking for hog wire or what we're going to fill the balustrade with, and if he wants to powder coat and stuff. So things are coming along real nice. Jeremy's got all these 12-foot nominal joists in there. They're a hair under, but that's good there. We've got a little bit of a countersink we're going to do over here, so get that one to sit in here. This one is just stuck to the side of this post, but things like that worked out really nicely. These will all be 94s, and these will all be 98s. They were supposed to be 96 and 96. I don't know exactly what these are going to be yet. Anyway, we didn't end up in the middle of this with this beam so perfectly that the 8-foot pieces that I bought could just fall right in, which had been my intention. But the thing about this is you just have to work with what you've got. The ground is always an unknown, and we ran into a couple of things here that forced while we've got straight lines in our posts, that straight line may be an inch or two to the left or to the right, just so that we didn't have to do a bunch of extra work. And so that being said, rather than the 8s, I'll show you out front, we'll just send those back, and we'll get half as many 16s, which we can cut at 94, and then we'll have what we need left of the 16 to make up the other joist length, which is a little greater than 96. That's our problem. The reason we can't just cut them all, you know, down a couple of inches is because the other half will need to be longer than 96 by a couple of inches, which is no problem. We haven't even unbuttoned this unit. They'll come with the Moffett and set our 16s off, and then they'll take this brick of, we get 24 16s, they'll take our 48 or 7, whatever, back. And anyway, we get money back because the price that we paid at this point, even though we're buying twice as long, it's usually for a solid, by the bore foot. Just because 2 8s make a 16 doesn't mean it's the same price. It's normally a bit more for a homogeneous long piece of lumber because it has to be a nicer tree or something, etc. So we made a little money back because the cost has come down since then. So we'll get some money back. They'll come and trade them for nothing. We'll have what we need in our 16s, and we'll have joists in the next full day we can put in on the site, which may or may not be tomorrow, but coming in hot with those. Yeah, those are perfect. And then we've got the angled ones and some angled rim joists. I'm putting the rim joist in down here just so that we can be sure of this length. I don't want to pack something in here and be taking measurements and need wiggle room over here at this, you know, on this situation that we don't have then, because, you know, I committed to something here. So you just want to be thinking about what's a commitment. Same with this here. So this is set up like that because we're a little out with this post, a little out with that post, and I want to slide them over in the notch. I tapped on it with a big hammer, but you get a lot of collateral movement. And when I established that they were both leaning out, well, then I knew to draw them together would solve our problem. So I overdid it a little bit because it's springy, and then I'll pin them, and when I let them go, they'll be good enough. And they'll be further controlled with the railing system that's here. And this is an angled rim that has at a 45 degree that has a stairway here, and that's an angle on that far corner there. But just want to be sure of things before we go making 20 joists a quarter of an inch too long, or worst case scenario, you know, even worse than that still would be making them a little bit too short. So anyway, I'm happy with this, I'm happy with that. That means we can fill all the way down, and we may pull things together or spread them apart, but you want all your joists the same length. Not going to start cutting to fit and measuring each area to fit. You'll end up with wiggle joists, and you'll end up with board layout, you know, deck board layout that it racks out a square on your way across such a huge surface. This thing is a monster. Biggest one I've ever built. Everything is cruising right along. This is one heck of a party deck, I gotta be honest with you. It's pretty big. Get down here to the end. Sizable. I think we're at 16 by 32 at least, if not 34, depending on how you want to, you know, we end short here on the left, but on the right it keeps going. So this center section is 34, I think, at the furthest length here. Good size. And in the end, it'll be kind of two obvious areas with this nick in the corner that kind of helps break it up. Nothing wrong with a full spread here, with a full flat deck. I just encouraged our customer to take an inside corner out here. I might be making that more of an issue for viewers than they might agree it is, but we went around about it quite a bit here just to make sure it made sense. But I think you'll see in the end it'll come together, and when you have so much flat surface, it can get a little boring. And so that's why, with a wandering balustrade of a unique sort that you'll see when we get there, that's where you get your little details on something like this, in my opinion, and rescue it from just sort of being a yawn. Hey, yeah, you know, nice just giant surface out back. It's cool in that it's big, but I like to, for all of our time and effort, make something signature. Stones in, grade goes down and over the bank, and from there to us. Welcome back, everybody. Jeremy's just throwing the sealer on those superficial posts, the posts that are notched to fit onto the rim joist or one of the beams, posts that don't go all the way into the ground. I use as many posts that we are going into the ground. I use as many of those right on up through to become, you know, balustrade or whatever as I can. Just, they're so nice and rigid when they're in the ground. It makes it great. It's super, you know, economical to get two from one, but then it makes no sense to just put a bunch more holes in the ground just so that everything, especially on a deck like this when we have many, you know, every corner we do here, outside and in, gets a double. We need another one here. Every corner we do gets a double post because of the you know, dog-eared corners. So one is a bearing post, the other one's superficial all the way around, some of which are notched for a double. You know, they're notched for this beam, or over here, you know, this beam again, so they're notched for that anyway. And then over there, they're just notched for one rim joist. Stairways are coming in. The lower newels, they go right into the ground. We just did those with a 2-manhole auger the other day. They go right down into the ground once more. Although we didn't use a concrete footing here because we're not bearing a lot of load. We're not bearing a lot of weight. Each of these here, you know, like this post here is on a footing because not only is all the weight in this area right above it, but all of these joists that come into this much of the beam, about half of the beam, half the distance between here and the next post, he's responsible for that pressure, and then half of the joists that attach to him all the way around like a hot spot here is all sort of load, that lumber itself and all the people and stuff that'll be on here in the future. So anyway, these things are load bearing, and that's why we have a footing. This here is just going to stand there, and we're looking for, you know, torsional resistance, or you know, for it to feel nice and strong, but it's not actually loaded vertically with anything. So we saved, what's that, $35–40 in those concrete footings that we originally purchased. They went back. Everything's perfectly aligned. First stringer's going on the inside. Everything's perfect. Using this white lumber again, and we've done some fine tuning again with the, you know, the ratchet strap and these here, and while we fill with dirt and stuff. But overall, and it looks like we could put deck boards on it after we tape it, because Jeremy's walking right on there. So we're getting to this point now, and then we're going to tape all the tops of the framing, and then start putting the boards down. We've got this area filled. All the joists are taped. We're going to do a double picture frame here, which means we're going to have 2 whole courses that go all the way around and follow the profile. Here, I'll go right up there. Stairs are, I don't want to call it done, but really close. They've actually been kerfed. So we did a kerf on each of them. And I'll show you the little LED light stuff that packs in underneath there. So those will have light. The stairs will be edge lit. And we pulled our string here on our double joist, which was placed here, and there's one down here somewhere. Anyway, in anticipation of the seam. Once again, so the ends of the boards get a round over, or you know, a fillet, and we can always see the string through the gap. So as everything dries, they're neither end to end tightly holding this crap in there to rot, and they're not on top of a shelf under there where that stuff can sit and stay. So that the most vulnerable point, this end, you know, imagine your stick of wood is a group of straws. The ends of the straws aren't trying to suck up any moisture any more than they normally would, which is a key component of my construction techniques. This is where we headed that joist off. But you'll notice there's also half-inch plastic conduit so that we can have some surface mount outlets out here. And we've got baluster. This is again all the blocking to catch ends of the filler boards because they come over and ready. They're going to come over and stop and hang in space more than they're really capable of here. You know, we've got to have this blocking to carry the picture frame, but we needed something in here to hold the ends of the boards up because you don't want to be at the end of those and then have them be springy. But we've got a notch in all the inside surfaces. It's a pre-notch, all the same depth. And then these pieces of hog wire, we're calling it, but it's like feed line panel. These are going down in there. However, we have to go to the nearest full square so that the edges have a vertical, so that the edges, you know, we didn't want just the raw ends, we wanted a complete vertical side, which not only does it slide, but it controls, you know, gives these strength. So these will each be grooved deep enough to allow each piece to go in there far enough. And these have been, you know, have already been in there. This'll I'll probably install the lower piece. All this is going to go out to be sandblasted, the galvanizing, because it's been out in the weather too long. And then a primer and a powder coat. This is the issue with the galvanized. It's perfect everywhere, but in these little spots where it's not, and you don't want to just powder coat that because it'll come back. Here's another one here, right? So some people just leave this in place as it is, but making it black will actually make it much easier to see through, which is the whole goal here, is that it's there but it's not there, and it's, you know, aesthetic as well. So anyway, those we'll get everybody to a point where the bottom rail is in, and these will probably get toe nailed with some trim head screws, and then that stuff will go out for powder coat, come back, slide in place. It'll be capped with the corresponding piece, the cap piece here, and then the top of this entire thing gets 2x8. It's like a cocktail ledge, so it hangs off of both sides of the 6x6, and it's almost like a bar. You know, it's almost wide enough to let's go look at that stuff. So it's plenty for like a plate of food, for birthday parties, you know, stuff like that. And we had to go get some beautiful specimens here, because again, decks are funny because it's a finish grade application done with softwood. So my mindset is always fewer knots the better. Knots denote softwood, and softwood denotes millwork, not finished quality. So we've been pushing all this ugly, smeary knot stuff off to the side, and we've been kind of, because it looks to me like, I mean, that's why we got 2 units of lumber here, because I knew we would only use about half of what's in them, and we'd want to discard the other half of it for reasons of quality. So as you can see here, the top boards, they look perfect, don't they? Beautiful, #1 pine, and they're good 3 or 4 layers, maybe 5 or 6 down, and the bottom half, and I'm sure it was intentional, is what I would call #2 quality. And so between the two of them, I think we'll use all the #1 quality, and then we'll use the very best of the #2 just to finish up. And it's just how it goes right now. In the past, you could count on the whole unit being #1 quality, but and they sell it and call it #1 quality, but they're squeezing everybody a little bit, pinching pennies, you know. So this here would be a #2 quality in my book, but totally usable, because for the most part he's pretty clear. And then we get into stuff that's just on the left there, it's just not as good in my opinion. So anyway, the outlets we're going to use are these here. Pretty cool. They give you a it's a flush mount. It's like a pill shape, and then it flips up and you can plug in your outlets. And I'm going to place this aesthetically, you know, balanced on a board or in between two, in the locations that he wants. And then I'll come back and I'll cut in the conduit body, this stuff here, you know, into a straight run of conduit under there from below. I'll cut in the conduit body, you know, take out 3 inches or whatever, and it's flexible, which makes it nice. And you can slip this into place, then you can run over to a junction box, and then out the junction box you can go to, I thought I had it in here, this is what they give you, to solvent weld piece of conduit to a threaded, this is like an adapter, this gray piece here, You guys familiar with threading? That's how it works. It's threaded, and then this here comes with those outlets, and that's because it comes with circular wire, and you run it through that hole, and then as you tighten this nut, it squeezes it like a ferrule. There's no ferrule in there. It squeezes it, the plastic just squeezes that circular wire enough to bite into it and hold it, and then that's a flexible whip that goes to that outlet itself. So this here will be part and parcel of the junction box on the out of the conduit where I cut it in, and then we'll take the 2 feet of flexible circular wire and make sure that we can get to the outlet itself, which is I think it's gonna be pretty cool. And then this stuff here is what he bought for the edges of the stair. And once again, I wish I had more than one hand here. Hang on. Here it is. So it comes with this loose wire, but the stuff itself, once it's lighting up, has been designed to go into a kerf, or the gap left after a saw cut. So I believe it's like kind of yeah, you know, it's kind of square and flexible like that, and it packs in there real nice. And then the lit side is the other side of it. Where is it? Yeah, you can see the lights in there on the one side. So those face down, the edge of them. Anyway, I think it's going to look rad. He'll have power in 4 different locations around the edge on the surface of the deck, and both staircases will have edge lighting, and then it'll just be a question of where we put a switch for that, which I think you'll want it inside the door, inside the patio door that goes out on the deck, but I'm not sure. And then we've got a bunch of lumber returns. We've got a clapboard that we can make the clapboard repair to where the dryer vent used to come out, and then we'll be down to waiting on that stuff there to come back from the powder coater before we can finish the railing system. Well, for a brief moment, there aren't leaves all over this thing. I mean, there's leaves all over this thing, but I'm telling you guys, my customers live in the woods basically, and every day this is almost, completely covered lately. So anyway, you can see our hard work a little better right now. We're coming in for a landing. Everything's kind of trimmed back. I got a little trimming to do here, but ready for the picture frame, which we've essentially started in the most complicated area because it is relatively short runs, and each of these need 2 notches, where over here we've got to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 notches. I've got them here, but if you're not super careful about your kerf, what side of the line you're cutting, or whether or not you're taking the line, all of a sudden, even though they're laid out at one point, you can have too much to one side or the other, and the whole piece can be replaced. And a 20-foot stick is like 37, 38 bucks right now. So we don't want to go through more than 1 each making this frame, because it's not really, it'd be nice to think that you could do it in one go, but it's just not possible. At least maybe more skilled folks. I'm just kidding, this is some highly skilled stuff here, and Jeremy's been doing just as well, if not better than I have been doing. We've got other features here, like notching the end of each of these lower stringers and punching a hole in there. I'm going to use a torch to kind of burn out this fuzz so that in the future it doesn't unnecessarily hang on to, again, bric-a-brac, leaves, and organic detritus, however you pronounce that. You don't want it hanging out in there rotting or discoloring things. So I guess we'll come back when we're essentially done. We're going to swap this sliding door. It's going to move over some. Maybe we'll look at that. Nothing nobody hasn't seen before. Oh, and the electrical has been routed into the house over here, and we're gonna cut in the outlets and stuff. I also left him a portal here for his generator. He was worried about passing his electrical cord out of the basement window whenever he should need his generator if they lose power in here, which actually kind of happens a lot. But instead, I just use this female threaded socket weld adapter, and on the back of the rim joist we'll use a coupling to pin it on there, and he'll be able to come out here. You paint that in to match the house and stuff, be able to come out, take that out, run a cord inside, and then put a plug in it when you don't need that. And the fascia's going up and stuff too. Pair of courses that overhang everything. Come on. Yeah, looking cool. Okay, we're going to add a new gliding Anderson door to this project, and we're going to move it over from the side of the house. It was so tight here before that inside it was actually right here with a little piece of shoe molding. We're gonna bring the wall over just like it is there, more conventional, which means we're just gonna move the rough opening over a little bit. But we ran into a few issues here. This is the sconce that was never installed, daisy chained on top of the jamb and around the corner to here, where, you know, this is your home run, one of the others a home run there. And so it just can't be there. Trim, installing the jamb in the future, or even just, you know, the next day, I may hit that, and then you've got a major, well, not a major problem, but you could undo everything that you just did and put it back, I guess, which wouldn't even be worth doing. So we're gonna weasel that out. We're gonna stay in the wall where we should be here. We're gonna turn and we're gonna go along, and then we're gonna go up and drill up, and then we're gonna use a deep cut trim router, or not trim router, but a router bit to carve a channel here, working on the outside over until we're in the wall bay again, and then we'll drill up into it. And that's because this room is actually a patio or some such thing. It's a concrete slab poured on top of 3 concrete walls. It's probably filled solid, and it had styrofoam on the outside, but regardless, it has a couple layers of tile, the customer's telling me. And inside were these beams, and they could be seen. They're just rough sawn, like a rustic finish somebody did here. And there's 2 corner posts, which means that the door has no header. It just relies on the beam, and you're basically free to go wherever you want in here, which is actually ideal for moving his door over today. Otherwise, we would have had this all opened up. We would have been trying to move the header over. And I guess he put this nice hardwood finish, trim top and bottom on top of that beam in here to sort of clean the room up a little. But it is solid softwood, and we will have to carve a trench in it. There's just nowhere else to take that electrical. And then the outside corner here was all kind of fudged. The sole plate was just yellow lumber, white lumber, whatever we're going to use. Green lumber here, treated. I brought a roll of gasket material, which will go down against the concrete, which is how we do it today. And we'll use Tapcons. We'll drill and Tapcon the sole plate in, and then we'll move the rough opening's going to move down a little bit more here. 3/8 plywood on the outside, so we'll just cover this all up when we're done. A new insulation bat here, and over here, the patio doors have to be exactly perfectly plumb. You really should do that on any door, but a sliding door particularly, otherwise that sliding action just sucks. And so to cheat it, the framing must have been in too far, and to cheat the door out, they just push the sheathing out and off of the framing. Up here is more like it should be from there on up, which isn't a big deal. But today we fill this with Great Stuff Pest Control, or we make other appropriate changes, so that push the sheathing off the sole plate down here, and they held it out with this shim. But that's just the hole from under the siding from outside. So obviously little mice and stuff moved right on in here and climbed all the way up where the hot air hangs out, made themselves a nice little nest, peed all down in here, poo everywhere, and little seeds. So we'll put some urine enzyme spray on that to knock that smell down, and then when we're finished, we'll pump those full of sealant and pest blocks so that nobody's moving in here ever again. And we'll get this all framed up, and then we'll treat it like a new rough opening. Flashing tape, door pan, sealant for the install. It was all just dry here, a little bit of tar paper or something, so way, way better. But I wonder sometimes how the door and window contractors explain to people when these things happen that it's going to be 2 or 3 times the install rate that they were told at the store it was going to be, because you just never know what you're going to find until you get into it. Jeremy's taking all our maker's marks off. Some of these boards that were on top of the unit of lumber that saw a little more sun, he's just getting them evened out so the sun will, like this one here is pretty gray, we'll take that little bit off. You want everything to dry and get the UV together, kind of come into one tone, and then be stained next year. And we got picture frame going all the way over to there, and a piece started for that, so it's really coming together. Hopefully this door goes in tomorrow no problem, right before the weekend, right before we get any weather. Just finishing up this handrail system on this big party deck from last year. Trying to make it in time for Memorial Day weekend. We'll see what happens. It's been real easy going all the way along. Essentially, we had these 2x4s that we milled with a trench at the bottom. Now you're potentially or ostensibly just finished watching a video from last year, but forgive me if I have to catch myself up. There's holes in these and holes at the ends to drain water. We didn't bother doing that on the top, but they were made to the same length as the bottom. And so all I've had to do is work my way around. And I went from here and went all the way over to there and down the stairs. I went right on by the middle here, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Still working on that frog in my throat, but I've had to pull the posts in using a ratchet strap as a come along, which isn't a great idea. You don't want to put a ton of, obviously by the size, this is a pretty heavy duty one, so I can give this put more torque on it, more pressure. But it's when you come to let them go and things can let go. I actually have a friend that got a hook in the eye, hook in the face. Anyway, if you're going to have to back one off that you've put too much pressure on, you want to tighten another one up practically as tight, and then loosen the first one and back yourself out rather than letting it explosively let go if you're doing this. But it's a fine woodworking tool as far as I'm concerned. It's a giant band clamp. But I've been sending these to the top flush. All of these posts were cut at the same height, 39 inches from the deck all the way around. And then we milled this lumber. I'm sending it to the flush to the top, centered on this notch. I just put a center mark with pencil and just eyeballed it into the notch. Some of them needed to be twisted with a clamp one way or another. And then we're using T25 drive, which I try to stick to unless I'm going with a finished screw. Number 10 by 4-inch long screws to come from that rail and go down into the meat of this 6x6, which I think is one of the best looking. It's ideally we're going to cover this whole thing with railing cap, and you won't see it, so it's not going to be the best looking, but it's going to be a really rigid and meaningful connection into that post. Now the bottoms we did with trim screws, I think, yeah, from the edges in like that. These fuzzies and stuff have to get sanded and finished off here, but those went in like that because I couldn't get from below, and I couldn't come down from above without making, this type of a. Not only is it ugly, but water will pool there and stuff on the bottom. So we did that one way on the bottom, more aggressively on top. We're going to come through with 2x8 that was hand-picked last year to be relatively clear and good looking, and we're going to cap everything and miter the corners. Now over here we had an issue because this post, out of all of them, now this is the load-bearing post that goes down into the ground. The other one is just for looks. At every one of these corners, the one goes into the ground, the other one's just for looks. This is load bearing, and we had a ton of settling out here to the tune of about 1 inch. And when you walked out there and looked across, my customer said, "Hey, I was looking, this was last year, looks like we settled a bunch on that front corner," which was unfortunately true. He was over here and had, this perspective. I can't remember if we covered this in the video. But we fixed that by letting go of that post everywhere here and just letting everything come up till the deck was level again and reattaching. Unfortunately, we had trimmed that post to the original 39 inches before the settling. So when we left it down and pulled everything else up, you can see it on the left there, it's shorter than everybody else by about 1 inch. So what are we going to do? There's no stretching or adding to this post, really, but that's what we're going to have to do. Wood isn't an additive material. Essentially, we'll come back and look at this. I'm going to do like a Z miter, or it's going to be 3 facets at 90 degrees to one another, but at 45 degrees from the side of the post for a short bit, and then at 90 through the majority of it, and then at 90 again to that, and 45 to the outside out, and it makes like a bird's mouth. Rather than cutting it on this face, we'll cut it on the side faces, and so it'll just be the leading edge of that miter that comes down to land with the piece that we add. That'll be a little bit longer, and it'll just. So I'll come in here and I'm gonna slide these up. I'm gonna plot out the Z on the side of this, which I'll plot and cut on this first because this is the one that we have to match. Then I'll go spend the time to try and make a component that'll come in and land, and the grain pattern will kind of, run together and won't call a lot of attention to itself, and see if I can't make something to fit to it. Rather than going to make the piece first and then hoping to make a cut again, mathematically it's gonna be one thing, but what actually happens with the workpiece is gonna be something else. So since we're at the top surface level of finish here, we're gonna work 2 other things and do things like scribe and stuff like that rather than measure and force things with math. This is the last step that we're measuring and forcing with math. This is the same length as the bottom, and so long as the posts were set plumb and we can pull it in tight and screw it there, it will help to force everything into a visual perfection, which is what we're looking for. Then the very final touches will dial in by being a little more organic and playing a little more jazz with our workflow, to quote one of my old bosses. Okay, cut these railings at the complementary angle here, and I'm trying to keep this stringer or cap to the railing system to be at the same elevation, and this cap is going to go up and turn as well, as far as I know, and everything here is going to be, for as complicated as it is, busy in some ways, some of the main features will be very smooth and modern and not draw a lot of attention to themselves. So quite a few verticals, but one relatively simple smooth top, like cocktail ledge. So that's sort of a nice way to do that. And then I think we might put a little edge on something, a little profile, a little bevel, to have them pick something out. You know, we have the opportunity to put it on top of the radius that's already on the deck boards on the outside edge if they wanted, and it would just be something that we put along the edges of the cap and the corners of the posts. So we'll have to look at that. But we got some more lumber to get through out here. That's mostly handrail. These are mostly drops. Well, we're down to finishing touches around here. We were able to put this one long 2x8 all the way around as a cocktail ledge. It flies all throughout. It ties the top of these posts together, holds them plumb, controls all of that. And each one of these joints where they come together, there's a heavy finished, it's a T15 finish head screw that goes through here at an angle. So as I've been going around, now that was the case when I filled that with that sealant, and I used it to pull it tight and hold it there while the sealant dried. But I've been backing these out because we're putting a back angle underneath this thing. And I made a bunch of prototypes. I don't know where they all went, but I wanted a 10-degree undercut and nipped corners is what we decided for the ends here. We were talking about just a point, but I think it was a little extreme for the customer. There'll be meat enough here to change that once or twice more if something needs to change in the future. But this is what we're going to do. I'm going to take less of a corner though, because I want to do the same thing on these corners, and to take that much gets us too close to the outside corner of the post. So we're going to go about an inch. Once I put the back angle on to both sides, then we'll go 1 inch over from the outside corner, make a mark, connect it, and that'll be what we cut off, which is what we did elsewhere. Now I've made it all the way to here, undercutting that railing, but down here you can see, and this is just a, you know, it ties in with the nature of the corners of the deck to begin with, and I think it looks pretty sharp. We're going to put a small chamfer or a small bevel on this top edge with a router once we're all done here, and here's, you know, showing taking that corner off. You can always come back and take more, but you can't really put things back. So here's where I missed a screw that I couldn't back out. Some of them stripped in the lumber, one out of every 10 or 15, because they have double threads. They have the threads that pull them in, and then the threads at the top that are supposed to pull both pieces together, which makes them really nice in a lot of ways. But taking them out and trying to put it back wiped it out, so that'll have to be cut flush, and then I'll put a little nail polish in this wood tone on the end of it, fresh end of it, to save it from corrosion and stuff. But and there was one here, but for the rest of them, they came out no problem. The way that I approached this was to measure around and see. I had from 7 1/8 to like 7 5/8 in terms of width, because they're just rough lumber. So I found the center line of the two ends of each particular piece. I measured, I divided it in half, I put a center line, and from the center line, I measured out 3.5 inches, which means in the end, these are all going to measure, without the chamfer, at about 7. Let's check that, bud. The idea being that they measure about 7. So in the middle, it's a little bit, yeah, it's a little light, if anything. We also had to mitigate, you know, coming in at an angle, and there's looking for there to still be plenty of overhang here. At a certain point, it's unprofessional to, you know, lose your overhang. So we still have 3/8 of an inch or so there, which is about as minimal. I would have preferred a half, but this is all, once again, in a perfect situation, it's different. But lumber, especially outside, you have to play a little jazz. So we made it to here. We're going to keep going. This has been tricky. If any of you are really paying attention and are really working in the field, you know that I've got to set up and plunge. You know, I've got to set the shoe way up, and I've got to plunge and then proceed. The outside corners are nice because I can follow through. The inside corners, I actually have to start standing here with this away from me, plunge and go. Not to mention ripping with a battery saw. When the lumber is tacky and a bit damp and stuff like that, sucks battery up like, you know, like you wouldn't believe. So I've got all of them on the charger right now. And then I'm following up to finish these inside corners. I'll use the oscillating tool just to completely take this out, and you get a little bit of circular saw mark that you'll take out with the sander. And then a couple of these flip-up outlets were hitting this lower stringer on the balustrade. So I went ahead and put a back angle on them, which now they flip up real nice and pass. And that is a, you know, echoes this, etc. Whether or not I put a small bevel on that, TBD, and we're going to decide that before I pull any of the others, and we'll either, you know, rip that and bevel it or just rip it, but I don't want to put it in and then take it back out to put the bevel on. Leaving it in over the winter time was a decision, a professional decision, so that they were basically trained through the elements to live in the position that, you know, that they're going to be in. You would think they would all just stay straight, but if they sat in a group, especially with that groove milled in the top, and one side of everybody got the sun, the other side sat in the cool ground and the moisture, by the time this, you know, we came back around to get to them, they'd have been all twisted into junk, and, you know, they wouldn't have been something you could even return, because it would have been purchased last year and they milled with a groove already. So we had one rogue here that went crazy in place even, but the rest of them have all behave themselves really nice. So we'll quickly pop them out and we'll treat them. And here's the other one here. Now this one I did the inside and the out, so it's appreciably thinner, but I think it's just snazzy. I mean, that's obviously a 2x4. This is a custom cross section, which is the idea here. We're going to elevate this whole thing by just operating on the lumber down at the end here to create custom profiles rather than just throwing everything together. And we're going to treat the outside corners of these posts too. Then we've got the little step lights that we've got to push into the kerf that's under here. So you get a little light that comes down. Those will be plugged in. But I pulled all the wire and connected all the outlets up. Maybe you've seen on my Instagram last week. And obviously they've got their patio furniture here, and there's going to be a sectional there, so it's starting to look the part, and to be something that they can come out and enjoy between when I'm here just finishing up. And now the game is just don't make a mistake, because if you do, you can pull the entire piece out and start all over again, which we don't want. I filled these cracks, and I'm going to do the rest of them now. I had to, like Bondo, plane that on and leave it to vulcanize and turn into a hard sandable rubber for a week or two. But then it sands right off if you don't rush the process. So we'll use that on some of these other cracks and top off some of these other miters, and the top crack specifically on these little guys. I mean, they look black now, they'll look black once the sealant's in there. And the sealant should stretch, and holy crap, I get to the end, by the way, and this last little piece, when there's a strip behind the saw, and I'm trying to pull and rip him off of there and just disconnect him where he's welded, butt welded by his end, the tiny little end of him, by that sealant that we're talking about. I guess that's not it. Anyway, I'm out here fighting and ripping and tearing and yanking just to get that little tiny bit of contact, surface contact, bit of sealant to let go of the end of that lumber, which, in long story short, I'm heartened by that. See, I haven't come back to look at my work with that sealant in it 20 or 30 years later, if we're so lucky here, because I'm not that old and I haven't had the opportunity. But I'm heartened by the fact that it fought me so hard already. I think it's a great, being polyurethane, it's an adhesive, and being for exterior, it's black, and it's been chemically, you know, prepared and designed to be out here. I think it's just a really nice, inexpensive touch to put in all of this joinery. So hopefully we get to do some final photos soon and some good coverage. I'm gonna clean this crap off of here, and then I'm gonna do, you know, see, you got shims and stuff in here. These are all the things that look ugly and unprofessional, but it's like, it's what's necessary to get everything to work out at the top level. And we'll clean up big boogers, and I'll do a real clean, tidy, black inside corner caulking job with that sealant when I'm all done here, so that from a low angle, relaxing in your Adirondack chair, it's just a nice, clean black shadow that you don't notice. Oh, and we got this sanded out, and it'll get better and better. Just got to get a little further with it. Okay, real quick. These are the two largest spaces on this baluster, on this deck, this balustrade. And therefore, we've had some issues here. A lot of times you'll see the lower stringer here, or whatever you want to call that, dipping down, bowing up. You see people leave a little stick underneath there to support it. I've always hated that. I've always hated a situation where you've got to see that. I didn't want to divide this again and have three spaces here, so I just rolled the dice. The customers got little kids, but they are already up on here, you know, levering on it back and forth, and the collateral, you know, of everything here being a little bit non-perfect, because again, we're outside. The lumber's changed even since last year. The top segment here has settled out of the groove in some of these cases. Now in these short runs, here it is here. In the short run, it doesn't, you know, I can go up with it, see? I can go up in there, and it sits down in here. And really the most important thing is that this is 4 inches here, no greater, and that's, you know, inside here can't be any greater than 4 inches. You can't take a 4-inch sphere, and you shouldn't be able to push it between anything. That's that infant head entrapment sort of situation. So anyway, most importantly, it's not leaving, and it's just settled out a little bit there. Unfortunately, it did it on these, and then this is so long that it could get pushed back and forth, and the kids were hanging on it, and he wasn't happy with that, so we had to come up with a solution. And he had a really great idea, and so I don't want to diminish it at all, but he wanted to do something like these tie rods that are in the shed door here that I think was the inspiration. We just needed to pull everything up tight to the top so that it wasn't settling down. And he's got this situation where the, you know, there's a turnbuckle in here, and they control the squareness of this door, and he was thinking they're about the same. They could be painted black, and it would disappear if it was used on the outside to pull everything up. So that's a really good idea. There's hardly much you could do to improve, except we have the benefit of this being steel and welded, and if I can hold it up to there and hold this wood up to it, everything will stack up tightly and will stay in there. So how do I hold that up? I ended up putting in a little stainless steel rope tie with 2 stainless steel screws, and it was, you can't get off the shelf any smaller, like 1/4 inch diameter. The smallest was like 5/16 or 3/8 was maybe. So I wanted it not to be rubbing and scraping the powder coat, so I put a little rubber hose around it. So I got some rubber hose, ID about 1/4, OD about 3/8. I got number 10. I wanted something pretty tough. Number 10, anything shorter than, you know, the 2, like 3 inches, which would be crazy. Stainless steel. And this is marine stainless steel. It is just Everbuilt brand, but it's hard to go wrong, it says on there. And rubber's rubber. And then on the bottom, I got some stainless steel all thread, 1/4 inch. And I got some plastic zip ties. And we have this hole in the center of every one of those to drain water, as well as those corners have a big notch in them to let debris and water fall out of it, so it's not sitting there and rotting. So I went around the steel, through that hole and back, and then around a little piece of stainless steel all thread. Now I'll put the tail on this zip tie, but you can't see that even from here. You'd have to be practically down there looking at it. Anyway, now everything is nice and square. That's not going to do any sagging, and the kids can hang on the steel because the steel's hanging on the length of those stainless steel screws. That can't be shoved down. Now you or me, we could stand on this wood and rip. I could shove and rip that zip tie off. If somebody wanted to use some black coated copper, like 14 gauge or 12 gauge Romex or wire, just the black, and go around everything and twist it underneath, that would be fine. That's plastic and copper. That would probably hold up against shoving on the wood, so time will tell. Anyway, that was a problem because I needed the clearance under here, there, but I already had a groove. So despite the fact that I had these with me, or you could have Forstner bit or anything, I couldn't start. This isn't deep enough. I could set everything down here. I took the lower thing out. We're processing those two to put a profile on them, make them more interesting than a 2x4. But I can't get started up in there because I can't find a center, and it would just trash that. So I have to start with a hole saw that I can reach up in there and get a center on, and cut through to the bottom of the groove, then snap those off with a little pry tool, like a little bar or anything like that, just they'll break off. And then I went back and just flattened the surface completely with this, or again, you could use a Forstner bit. And then I have the space to set up this and that with the screws and hold that all up. And that's my little elegant solution for that situation. And obviously that only works with this complete, you know, a copy of this design. If you have a different design, it'll have to be something different, but both of us, he was inspired thinking about it with that and got that far. I thought that was really good, but I just wanted to see if there wasn't something that would be basically invisible, and I'm pretty content with this, and we'll see how it holds up.